Our keynote speaker tonight is Mr. J.D. Vance. He is the award-winning, best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of family and culture in crisis. He grew up in the Rust Belt city of Middletown, Ohio, and the Appalachian town of Jackson, Kentucky. He enlisted in the Marine Corps after high school and served in Iraq. A graduate of Ohio State University and Yale Law School, he has contributed to the National Review and the New York Times, and has appeared on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and CNBC.
Currently, JD works as a principal at the leading Silicon Valley investment firm and lives in San Francisco. LEDA would like to extend its heartfelt thanks to the Honorable Jesse Furman for introducing Mr. Vance to the LEDA community. Please join me in welcoming JD Vance.
Well, let me just be, I think, the third person this evening to thank the Honorable Jesse Furman for introducing LEDA to J.D. Vance. But more importantly, for introducing LEDA to me. It's an organization that is very close to my heart for those of you who have read the book. And for those of you who haven't, I can sort of explain a little bit why this organization is very close to my heart. I, as the introduction mentioned, grew up in circumstances that are pretty uncommon for a place like Yale Law School. I think that for the 40 LEDA scholars who are here, some of the stories that I tell are probably extraordinarily familiar, or at least something you've heard of before. But when I think of the circumstances that I came from and how incredible it was to go to college, how incredible it was to go to law school, it struck me that many of the things that were most difficult about navigating that environment were not matters of finances, as I've once remarked. Yale Law School gave such generous financial aid that being poor had never paid so well. But I was, in a lot of ways, socially and environmentally unprepared for the environment that I was confronted with at Yale. I didn't know how to navigate through these random obstacles, through these different social networks that are incredibly important if you want to get ahead in a place like that, if you want to access all the opportunities that are out there. But I was just incredibly ignorant. And I was able to close that gap for reasons of luck. There were mentors, both peers who knew how to navigate that world, and also professors who knew, maybe just because of the way that I was looking around, that I had no idea what I was doing, that they should offer a helping hand. And what's so awesome about this organization, about LEDA, is that it recognizes that social gap. It recognizes some of these environmental things and really tries to close it in a systematic way, because, as someone said earlier, it's so important that these institutions that are real gatekeepers to so many of the opportunities and positions of leadership in our country are open to the broad swath of the country, not just those who grow up in extreme privilege, not just those who go to a prep school. I think that I should say to the LEDA scholars that in a lot of ways, because of where I came from and because of some of the things I've done, I think I understand you probably better than most of the people in this room. I remember when I was a second-year law student at Yale and everyone was talking about this thing called the Yale Law Journal, and I had no idea really what it meant. I had no idea what it caught or what opportunities it opened up, no reason to think that it was worthwhile, and the information that I heard from the administration was a little conflicting. Some people said, well, you should go after this credential because it's very helpful. Maybe if you want to clerk for a judge, it's very useful. Then other people said, you shouldn't really go after it. You should really pursue your dreams. And it just struck me as I was navigating this process that I actually didn't know what the answer was, and the official channels of information weren't especially helpful. They were telling me conflicting things. The first time that I ever went to a law firm recruitment dinner, we think of these things as relatively trivial. You sit down, you shake somebody's hand, you introduce yourself, but I had no idea how to conduct myself socially. I was happy when I came in here that they were offering me white wine, but they were just offering me one type of white wine, because I remember the first time that I told somebody that I wanted a glass of white wine at one of these law firm recruitment dinners, and somebody said, "Would you like Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay?" And I remember thinking to myself, is she screwing with me? But she wasn't, of course. She was talking about the two different types of white wine, and so I told her I'd like to have a Chardonnay, not because that's what I preferred over Sauvignon Blanc, but because that's the one that seemed easiest to pronounce. I'm sure that these experiences, that these stories are not unfamiliar to LEDA scholars. So before I say something to them, I just want to say something to this incredible organization, to Beth. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be among people who are really concerned, I think, about the important problems that exist in this country and are trying to do something about them. Thank you to everyone who really contributes, whether it's financially, emotional resources, mental resources, because it is extraordinarily important for not just the children who go to these institutions, but for their families and for their communities to feel like the gatekeepers of opportunity, the gatekeepers of power, the gatekeepers of real chance in our country aren't just closed off to the lucky few, that these doors are going to be opened to people who grow up in circumstances that aren't obviously privileged. And it's so great that this organization is committed to that. To the LEDA scholars, before I shut up, and I was told to be brief, I think that you guys are at the stage in your life where you haven't quite gotten there, I don't think, but very soon, old people will tell you and offer advice about things that you don't want them to tell you about, and you don't care to hear their advice. So I'm going to welcome you into this new world by offering you some unsolicited advice. I have a few things written down here. The first is to find mentors and to find true friends. I didn't know really what a mentor was until I got to Yale. The idea of cultivating relationships because they may pay some benefit later on in life just seemed icky to me. That's not how people deal with each other where I grew up. You don't cultivate friendships because something will be good for you or meaningful for you. So don't cultivate mentors, don't cultivate friends for that reason. Don't go and search out people who will produce good things for you. Go and search out people who you admire, who are kind to other people. Go and find the professors who are empathetic to students who grow up in circumstances like you did. Go and find people who understand maybe a little bit, or if they don't understand, they're at least trying to understand a little bit about where you came from and why you think the way that you do, why you have the attitudes that you do. Because if you do that, you'll find not just people who can help you navigate various employment or educational opportunities, you'll find people who will really help you and who will really look out for you. I was lucky to find those people not just in my circle of friends, but also among various professors and other people who I've encountered. And I was never looking for somebody who would guide me through an employment prospect, who would guide me through an employment opportunity. I just wanted to find somebody who I could trust, who I could depend on their advice, who actually understood, or like I said, tried to understand somebody who grew up like I did. The second piece of advice is embrace who you are. You will be introduced to people who are very different from you, and that doesn't just start in college. That's going to be for the entire rest of your life. You will often find yourselves in social circumstances where you feel like a complete alien, where everyone seemingly is comfortable. They know what they're doing. They know how to conduct themselves, but you just have no idea what's going on. And there's a natural tendency when you're in those environments where you feel like an alien to try to do everything you can to fit in. But I think that one of the things that I really benefited from and that I really learned is that just be who you are. Embrace where you came from, and embrace the values of your family and your community and your culture, because that's really what's going to guide you over the next 60 and 70 years of your life. There's going to be no shortage of opportunities to fit into the various social networks, to the incredibly elite networks that you guys will find yourself in, but it will be hard to really keep your roots, to continue to be rooted in where you came from. And I think that you will find the further you progress, the further you get through educational opportunities, employment opportunities, the more you'll find that where you came from offers a whole lot of value. I didn't appreciate that. I thought that where I came from was stupid and backwards. That was the lesson that I picked up in a lot of ways from the environment around me when I got to Yale, when I got to my first law firm. But the older I get, and I'm not that old, luckily, but the older I get, the more that I realized that it was incredibly beneficial to me to have grown up with those values and to grow up among those people. Third thing I'll offer is to find something really meaningful in your life, whether it's a church, whether it's a tradition from the culture that you came from, whether it's a book or a series of books that are really meaningful. This world that you've just entered, and trust me, it only gets weirder as things progress. This world that you've just entered will have a way of really encouraging you to think and be preoccupied with achievements, with the things that you can accomplish, with the credentials that you can put next to your resume, but find something that you actually like doing. It isn't all, of course, about achievement. It isn't, of course, about just getting ahead. It's often about finding something that actually gives the day-to-day some real meaning, and so I'd encourage you to find that. And the fourth thing I'll say, and the last piece of advice I'll offer before I shut up, is don't be afraid, and this is related to the third piece of advice, but don't be afraid to put family and friends above achievement. I worry when I look at the social class that I've entered and I compare it to the social class that I left, that we are so obsessed with credentials, that we are so obsessed with getting ahead, that we derive so much meaning from the quality of the school or the U.S. News and World Ranking report of the school that our children go to, that we forget sometimes to really prioritize the things that truly matter, our friends and our family. The very best piece of advice that I ever got from a mentor was from Amy Chua, who was the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. And I was thinking about going off to California to go and clerk for a federal judge who I didn't really want to clerk for, but he was a really fancy federal judge, and there was a chance that if I clerked for him, I might be able to clerk for the Supreme Court. And I went into her office and I expected her to say, JD, go and do it. Be ambitious. Go after this thing. But what she said instead is, I know that you're dating this girl, and I know that you really love her. And I'll tell you that if you go off to California for a year and devote your life to this clerkship, it's the sort of thing that may very well destroy your relationship. So my advice isn't to go after the job. It isn't to go after the credential. It's to go after this relationship that obviously means a great deal to you. And 5 years after she gave that advice, I'm standing up here. I'm married to the woman that she gave me that advice about, and she's 23 weeks pregnant. So don't be afraid to prioritize family. It's something that, it's a message, unfortunately, that I think you probably get a lot more from the places you came from than from some of the places you find yourself these days. So with that, I'll give you the last piece of advice. I know I said that was the last one, but this is much more simple. My mamaw, this is my word for grandmother. This is a word that's pretty common in hillbilly culture for grandmother. My mamaw was a gun-toting, cussing, really crazy woman who had an absolute heart of gold. And she didn't graduate from high school. She was pregnant for the first time at 14, a baby she lost. She had her first child when she was 17. And what Mamaw told me when I was really close to giving up on myself, when I was at a point in my life where I thought the odds against me, the odds against my family were so intense that there was no way that it was even worth working to overcome those odds, she said, JD, respect that life is unfair for us. That life isn't as fair for us as it is for other people, but never be like those people who think the deck is stacked against you. You can still control your own destiny. That's an incredibly important and difficult balance to strike when you grew up in disadvantage. To recognize, to not beat yourself up over the fact that life is going to be harder for you, a little bit harder for you than it is for other people, but to continue to recognize and respect your own agency, the fact that you still have an incredible amount of power. I know that you guys are just the lights in your communities and your family, that so many people are proud of you, that so many people are really rooting for you to succeed, but not just to succeed, but to achieve real fulfillment and real happiness. And I just want to add my name to that list. I'm so grateful to be here, and I am really rooting for you guys. And I know it's early, but I think really great things are going to come from everything you're doing. So God bless you, and thank you, everybody, for having me.